Julie Ann Gonzalez. She vanished in 2010, just 21 years old. Her body's never been found. Today,
on March 26, 2010, Julie Ann Gonzalez, a 21-year-old woman, dropped off her daughter with her husband but never returned home. Her family reported her missing the next day. Julie Ann's car was found parked at a Walgreens, but she was nowhere to be found. She was raising her 2-year-old daughter while working as a pharmacy technician. What happened to her? Let's dive into the mysterious cold case of Julie Ann Gonzalez. 21-year-old in 2010, Julie Ann Gonzalez resided in Dripping Springs, Texas. Although she was married to George de la Cruz, the two of them were not cohabitating. The divorce proceedings between the two were ongoing. Layla was a small child born to Julie Ann and George, who were about 2 years old at the time. With her pharmacy technician job, education, and time with her daughter, Julie Ann was constantly occupied. She was praised for being diligent and compassionate. On March 26, 2010, a close friend of Julie Ann said that she had accepted her motherly responsibilities and was raising her child on her own. George last saw Julie Ann, and he said that she had come to hand off their daughter because they shared custody of her. Dora Soto, Julie Ann's aunt, had anticipated hearing from Julie that day, but she didn't. Her attempt to be reached by Dora was unsuccessful, so her family started to wonder when she didn't return their calls and texts. Julie Ann allegedly told George she was on a short trip. According to Julie's aunt, mother, Sandra, and sister, Samantha, they all asserted that Julie Ann would not have left her daughter behind and would have at least informed a member of the family that she was departing. According to Julie Ann's relatives, her child was the center of her universe, and she would never abandon her. In addition, Julie Ann was a dependable person who kept in touch with her loved ones. By 11 p.m. that evening, Julie Ann's mother and aunt called the Austin, Texas, police to report her missing. The cops had no proof that Julie Ann hadn't left on her own initiative. She was an adult, they claimed, and was free to go. The following day, March 27, 2010, Julie Ann's mother and aunt noted that her new car was also missing. Aaron, Julie Ann's new boyfriend, and her family were receiving texts from her. Given that she had used her moniker, Julie Ann's sisters thought it was her. Uncle, mother, and boyfriend of Julie Ann weren't so sure. Julie Ann had just broken up with him, according to a message Aaron had just received from her. Because Julie Ann was head over heels in love with him, her mother was surprised. In addition, Julie Ann or someone using her phone had written on Facebook and left several notes on her MySpace page saying she was depressed. Julie Ann had written that she was eager to begin her life in Colorado after meeting a man named James there. The fact that these texts weren't from Julie Ann was known to her mother and aunt. It was not how Julie Ann would write, and she would not have abandoned her daughter. Aaron inquired about Julie Ann's second name by asking her. No time for games, the person on the other end of the line declared, adding that they had never sent any additional messages to Julie Ann's family. The last person to see Julie Ann alive was George, who was contacted by the authorities because they were unsure if she had left on her own or if foul play had taken place. George simply informed them that Julie Ann had dropped off their daughter before abruptly leaving. The relatives of Julie Ann started their own investigation. When her aunt was out for a drive around South Austin, she noticed Julie Ann's new automobile parked at a Walgreens. Julie Ann was nowhere to be found when her aunt quickly raced inside and searched the entire store. When Julie Ann's aunt contacted Julie Ann's mother out of concern for what she would discover, the two of them searched Julie Ann's trunk but were unable to locate her. They did discover a paper bag in the rear seat that contained Julie Ann's daughter's asthma medication. Not that Julie Ann hadn't given George a crucial prescription for their own daughter. One of the employees at Walgreens was questioned by Julie Ann's relatives about whether she had visited the store. He recognized her from the image they showed him. They also questioned him about the automobile outside. According to him, a girl entered the business and claimed that her car was giving her trouble. Although Julie Ann herself had not entered the store, the police discovered many women who fit her description when they received the Walgreens CCTV footage. Then, Julie Ann's family distributed T-shirts with her image on them and covered the city with billboard posters. The police investigated Julie Ann's social media accounts and phone records. Since March 27, 2010, the day after she was last seen, her phone and social media had stopped being utilized. Victoria de la Cruz, George's mother, frantically called the police and requested that they visit her home. Victoria called them after discovering a sizable hole in the storage shed of the house she and her son shared. She said to them that after beginning to dig, she became frightened and felt it would be best to call the police. Victoria was plainly disturbed and coated in dirt when the investigators arrived. She had contacted them about a hole that uncannily resembled a grave. According to George, the hole was an electrical one. However, they continued to dig and found no trace of Julie Ann in the trench. The cops got hold of Julie Ann's banking information. They discovered that George had used Julie Ann's credit card at Walmart and Best Buy on the day she vanished. Because of his obsession with video games, one of the reasons he and Julie Ann got divorced, George bought an Xbox points card at Best Buy. Instead of working and earning money, George would have preferred to sit at home all day and play video games. Victoria permitted a home search by the police. They discovered the items they had bought from each retailer inside, along with a Best Buy receipt. The authorities were able to view George and his daughter on both stores' surveillance cameras. On March 26, 2010, Jim Cook, a wireless professional, checked George's phone to determine his whereabouts. Additionally, he made a phone-related comparison with them. Both of Julie Ann's and George's phones were in motion at the same time, indicating that George was in control of her phone. From the same IP address, George had also accessed both his and Julie Ann's MySpace pages. The cops also investigated George's Xbox usage. On average, George would spend 12 to 15 hours a day playing video games, but on March 26th, he hadn't played in close to 20 hours. The authorities had reason to assume George had injured Julie Ann, but they lacked sufficient proof to even establish her death. Sadly, the investigation was then abandoned for around 3 years. Family of Julie Ann, they had to share custody of George while they awaited an answer. Julie Ann's mother kept pestering George about it. On September 13, 2013, George de la Cruz was arrested and charged with killing Julie Ann Gonzalez, as he had always promised her she would. If George had cooperated and disclosed the location of Julie Ann's body, the prosecution would have reduced George's punishment to 50 years. George rejected the offer and chose to enter a not guilty plea because he has consistently denied being involved. In April 2015, George's trial got underway. George never expressed regret but appeared frazzled. Although there was no body, the prosecution needed to persuade the jury that Julie Ann would never return. They claimed that de la Cruz's backyard and shed also contained a knife, ammo, and some clothing that appeared to have been burned. However, defense attorneys Keith Lauerman and Robert McCabe argued that the prosecution had left too many unanswered questions and loose ends. They criticized the state's expert analysis, questioned its witnesses, and declared that the time frame provided by the prosecution was illogical. George de la Cruz, who was characterized as an immature and careless heavy video gamer, would not have had the time or resources to clean his home, get rid of his ex-wife's remains, and dig a grave in his backyard before he was seen on security camera footage shopping with their daughter. The attorney argued that you convict on truth, not imagination, and you convict on logic, not feelings. If you don't, he warned the jury, innocent people end up in prison. McCabe stated that convictions are about knowledge. George de la Cruz was found guilty on April 22, 2015. When 27-year-old George was given a life term in jail in October 2016, Julie Ann's family rejoiced. He lowered his head as they did. He is still detained at the Jim Ferguson unit in Madison County, Texas, which is an unincorporated area. In the year 2043, he will be eligible for parole. According to Julie Ann's family, they are hoping that George will one day let them know where Julie Ann is. They are hoping he will tell Julie Ann, whose mother Sandra Soto's home burned down in February 2023, the truth about what actually happened to her mother. After being awakened by their dog, she and her family were able to escape safely, but the house was destroyed, and they lost everything. San Marcos's Jack's Roadhouse hosted a fundraiser to support the family. Live music and homemade food were presented during the gathering. The family found solace in the help they've received from complete strangers as they cope with this most recent setback. We had experienced a lot, according to Julie Ann's sister Samantha Petrie, and when I initially heard the news, I did believe this was simply another challenge thrown our way. Today's events clearly demonstrate that our friends, family, and loved ones don't just provide us with support and love, they also remember our family and Julie Ann Gonzalez's story. How was the video? Please comment.